having that perspective frees you to increase your value. One of the biggest problems throughout the last 500 years of atheism, and atheists never address, they never debated, is that it always results in meaninglessness. The philosophical term for this is nihilism or nihilism. It is always meaninglessness, because no matter how much you want to try to find meaning in your insignificant place in the universe and time, you cannot get around the fact that that always results in a rational conclusion of your life means nothing. Welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast. Today, why is it so hard to experience happiness in life? Where does it come from, and why do we as human beings struggle to experience it? This is the Salty Pastor. I'm Douglas Peak, and I am your, I like to say, soft and cuddly Salty Pastor. Why do we call ourselves a Salty Pastor? Because salt is all about preserving what's true. It's what is actually true, and you can figure that out. It's not a great mystery. If you're willing to seek, you ultimately find. If you knock, the door is open to you. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of persistence, but I believe that you need to become a part of the Salty crew and participate in what we're doing here as the Salty Pastor Ministries. Because our goal is not to get you to buy into something that we're doing. Our goal is to coach you up in your faith. It's to help you in your journey. We exist to serve you. That's what the Salty Pastor is all about. Our goal is to help you form your own beliefs, because it's what you believe that matters most. The predominant approach today, I think, is this, is if you want to follow Jesus, then you have to believe all of the things that whatever group is talking about him, believe about him. Now, in one aspect, it's true. You can't follow Jesus and meet Jesus if you don't know the authentic things about him. On the other hand, what people do is they mostly gossip about Jesus instead of just saying, here he is, here's where you find him, go and meet the real deal. Oftentimes people talk about Jesus and what he would think and what he would say and what he would do, as opposed to saying, well, I met Jesus and this is the real Jesus and this is how you can meet him for yourself. And that's the goal of this podcast. It's to give you the most accurate portrayal of where you can find Jesus, right? And we use history, we use philosophy, worldview, we use archaeology, but most importantly, we use the Bible. And we go to the scriptures in its authentic form in order for you to say, oh, okay, this is how I find Jesus. We're not there to tell you, we're not digging in the scriptures to tell you about him as much as we're digging in the scriptures to help you discover him for yourself. So, if you remember on Tuesday, we kind of launched off in this whole new thing that we're going to take the next 6 months, we're going to dig deep down into, and that is all about happiness. And we looked at a little video of Nick Saban. He gives this speech everywhere he goes, and he gives it to his football players when he was actively coaching. And he just basically talks about that if you want to be happy for an hour, eat a steak. If you want to be happy for a day, play golf. If you want to be happy for a week, go on a cruise. If you want to be happy for a month, buy a new car. But if you want to be happy, he says, throughout your entire life, if you want to cultivate a happy life, you're going to have to ask yourself a simple question. If I didn't show up today in this place, wherever your place is, would anyone miss you? Would it make any difference if you didn't show up? The way in which people miss you is if you are significantly adding to their lives, okay? And I want to, just remind us about what he said. And that is that the key to happiness is significance, not just getting what you want, but just significance at its core. So I just want to recap that little video because it brings home the point, and the point that I think is really important for every critical thinker, every person who wants to know what they believe and why they believe it, and they want to be pursuing their own faith, they realize, wow, happiness is directly linked to my significance. And then he kind of talks about human nature, and he said something that was really interesting to me, and that is human nature is not concerned about being the best or doing your best or pushing yourself to do whatever it is that you're doing and to be the best. Human nature is about survival, just getting by. And so isn't that interesting? Significance in the pursuit of doing your best is critical for happiness, but your human nature on the other side is not concerned with that. It's not motivated by that. So what does that mean? Well, when it comes down to it, the one thing every human being has in common is we have a nature. And your nature is what stops you from experiencing the fullness, significance, meaning, and purpose in life. So you're not happy because of your sin nature, your tainted nature. Now, what I told people is that, hey, we're in a new studio, and I talked on Tuesday a little bit about why do I always have a bow in the back? And it's not because I am this like professional bow hunter. It's not because I am just killing it out there with the bow. As a matter of fact, when I shoot my bow, I may be average at best. So I can sort of hit what I'm aiming at, I guess you could say. But the reason I have the bow and I have it here on set is because it is a reminder. And it is a reminder to me that my sin nature is something that causes me to miss the bullseye on a regular basis. Now, oftentimes when you go to church, you go to churches, or you listen to speakers, what they do is they try to use moralism to bring about conviction in your life. And I've always felt that that's unbiblical. That's not how Jesus did it. Even though he was harsh with people who rejected him, and he was, he laid down the smack, and he would light people up all the time. I often say Jesus talked about hell and damnation more than anybody else in the Bible, and that's true. But what's interesting is that sin in the Bible is a visual or an optical term that means you have missed the bullseye. You didn't quite see and hit exactly what you had to hit. And that really applied to archery at that time, which is the predominant long-range weapon that they had. And so you have to excuse me, I have a cold that I'm working through. So what happens is in this case is the bow is a metaphor for me that my sin nature isn't something that I walk around feeling horrendously ashamed and guilty about, that Jesus has set me free from that. But that doesn't mean that I still am not influenced by it. And so it's a reminder to me of why it is important to pursue my faith, to grow in my faith. Because what that does is that overcomes the pull of the sin nature that is still with me. And it'll be with me until I pass on from this material world and go on to glory. So what I tell people is if you want to see the effects of sin in your life, the best place to see it is in how it pulls your nature, influences your nature away from the things that develop a long-term happiness in your life. Did you catch that? The effects of your sin nature is to stop you from developing what you need to develop in order to seed happiness throughout your entire life. So that becomes now a very important question. What in the world do we do about it? And you remember Dr. Arthur Brooks, we watched another video from him last week. He's a lead researcher at Harvard over the happiness study. Very few things coming out of Harvard right now that are good, but this is one of them. And I just want you to listen to it again, just for no other reason than just to remind you of what you listened to on Tuesday, because it's really important. Let's listen.
What will happen is when you neglect your spiritual life, your happiness will fall. And when you neglect your physical life, your unhappiness will rise. Those are two different things processed in different parts of the limbic system of your brain. And you need to manage both the unhappiness and happiness in your life through the way that you gear your habits. And so the areas of faith, family life, friendship, and work that serves other people and is really productive. Those are the happiness side. On the unhappiness side, you need to manage that largely through taking care of your health. So better health through health and fitness and what you're eating and how much you're moving, et cetera. That's the best way to manage your unhappiness, your negative affect. The worst way to do it is workaholism and alcoholism and drug addiction and all the other things that people do to try to feel a little less unhappy.
So remember what he said here. Happiness is processed in the limbic section of your brain, but it's not on a continuum. In other words, well, I'm not very happy today, so that means I'm sliding towards unhappiness. Actually, what he says is you've got two tracks simultaneously. And if you neglect your spiritual life, your happiness will decrease. If you invest in it and work on it, your happiness goes up. And if you can take care of your physical health, guess what? Your unhappiness drops. And so what you're trying to do is you've got two separate things going on in your life that you're trying to navigate. And so he says the best thing to do is, number one, try to get healthy, do things that are good for you physiologically, because that lowers your unhappiness. We know this to be true. A lot of people who are dealing with depression and anxiety, oftentimes if they go and work out, if they go and exercise, it releases things physically and hormonally within them that helps them get over depression quicker. And so physical activity is very important if you are trying to deal with these things in your life. But so your unhappiness and negativity drops. Now, I'm going to say something really salty here, and that is that one of the reasons why women today are struggling with mental health more than males is simply because they're not as physically active as they used to be. And their unhappiness is going up. And research says that today, females have 3 to 4 times as many negative emotions in a day than males do. Now, it's very important to understand. I'll tell a story. About, 5 or 6 years ago, when Kim could still travel, we went back to Vermont to look at the changing of the leaves in October. And while we were there, we went to this one town, and it was really cool. And they had a working farm that had become a museum, and it was a very early museum there, and so a very early farm, and we went and learned all about it. It was awesome. And something that was really interesting is that we went in and we saw what the men had to do each day and then what the women had to do each day. And there was this list of all these things these women had to do. You know, they had to prepare all this food, make all this food. They had to bake, so many different mincemeat pies. They had to wash and clean all these vegetables. They had to do this, they had to do that. And, the list of stuff that they had to do would take the modern person, guy or gal, probably 2 days to complete. And you know what it said? That women had to complete these tasks before 9 a.m. in the morning every single day. And you're like, wow, these women were working their butts off and they were sweating and moving. And they were so physically active. And I believe there's a direct correlation between the amount of negative emotions that females are experiencing today and their level of physical activity. Because you go back 150 years and you see that the demands on women were immense from a physical perspective. Same thing with men. Men worked physically all day long. This birth of this go into an office and sit in a chair 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week is a brand new phenomena over the thousands and thousands of years of recorded history that we have. So no wonder mental health issues have increased. It's because, as Dr. Brooks says, we are suffering from a lack of physical activity, and so our physiology is dropping, and what happens when that occurs is our unhappiness goes up. So it's very important to understand that. So happiness is not on a continuum. Remember, happy, unhappy. It's on two separate tracks that run parallel, and you have to balance them out. Now back over to the happiness side. He says that you have to invest in your spiritual life or your faith. And he defines, the happy side of your life, your spiritual life, as faith, family, friends, and a fruitful or meaningful work. And so I want you to listen to another short video from Dr. Arthur Brooks in a different interview where he talks about developing these different types of things in your life so that your spiritual life grows. So let's take a listen.
The happiest people pay attention to four things every day. They pay attention to their faith or life philosophy, things transcendent to them. You're getting that through your meditation. I'm getting that through my religion. Right. Some people get that by studying the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach or walking in nature without devices in the Brahma Muhurta, the creator's time. But you got to do it. You got to do something where you're little and the universe is large, because that gives you peace and perspective. Second is family. Family is a mystical bond. And if you don't have that, you're going to be in trouble. The third is friendship. It's really, really important that you're not utilitarian about your friendships. You need to spend the time and do the work to have people who just love you, who are useless to you, and you're useless to them. You simply can't get the happiness that comes from true, intimate, love-based friendships. And last but not least is work. And all that matters with work is earning your success, creating value with your life, and being fairly evaluated on the basis of the value that you're creating is life affirming. But the bottom line to remember is faith, family, friends, and work.
Now, what's most interesting about this is he talked about these four different things, but the thing he spent the majority amount of time on, the spiritual side of you, is your faith. And he says that you have to develop your faith / philosophy of life, which, of course, if you use a biblical definition of the term faith, it is a philosophy of life. It is a world view. That's exactly what it is. So I want to focus on this thing that he's talking about, because if you're a critical thinker, if you're a person who believes fluff is not enough, this is where you can apply your critical thinking skills, because you're going to say to yourself, what is my philosophy of life? What is my faith? Where am I placing my faith to bring my life meaning? So if developing your faith is key to happiness and experiencing more happiness, the obvious thing before us is simply, why are so many people unhappy? Well, there's a direct link between developing your faith, right, the spiritual portion of your life, and how much happiness you're going to experience. And since very few people are experiencing happiness today, we'd have to say there's a breakdown in the development of people's spiritual lives. And it all comes down to me about the issue of belief. And that is that if you believe the wrong things, it's hard to develop your spiritual life. If you believe the right things, it's easier and more effective to develop your spiritual life. Now, what Dr. Brooks does in that short video is he incorporates any practice that can help you have a sense of awe and wonder. And notice what he said very specifically. He said, this faith or this philosophy of life needs to make your universe larger. So you have to overcome the self-directed self, your selfishness, right? Your self-centeredness. And he goes, so you have to make your universe larger. And that's what gives you peace and perspective, okay? Now, I agree with him wholeheartedly that developing your faith brings peace and perspective. It makes your universe bigger. But only, and this is what he doesn't really dig into, and I understand why he's doing it, but only if what you're building your faith on is the ultimate truth or the accurate reality. This is why it comes down to belief and how important it is in your life. You are valuable. You matter to this universe. You are important, but very few people feel that way. Why? Because they spend their time believing in things that diminishes their value, their importance in this universe. I mean, the thing that just pops into my head right off the top is scientific materialism and atheism. There is no more dehumanizing ideology or belief system that you could ever adopt that simply says you are worthless. Now, some people are like, well, I find peace in that, knowing I'm just a bug or a dot on this thing that's hurling through eternity and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but I don't understand how having that perspective frees you to increase your value. One of the biggest problems throughout the last 500 years of atheism, and atheists never address, they never debate it, is that it always results in meaninglessness. The philosophical term for this is nihilism or nihilism. It is always meaninglessness, because no matter how much you want to try to find meaning in your insignificant place in the universe and time, you cannot get around the fact that that always results in a rational conclusion of your life means nothing. You have no value. What you do makes no difference, and you are not important. So this is a perfect example of ideology that when you believe it, undermines the notion that you're valuable, you're important. How can you pursue a spiritual life, a significant faith, if you put your faith in something that produces meaninglessness? That's why I'm all in on Jesus. I am 100% all in Jesus. The answer is Jesus will always be Jesus. When it comes to getting your spiritual life on track, tell me, what is better than the way that Jesus laid out to do that? What way explains our situation and circumstance better than what Jesus said? What produces the best outcomes other than what Jesus said? Now, if you're a critical thinking person and you're saying, wow, I'm valuable, I'm important, I don't want to adopt an ideology that results in something that's futile or meaninglessness. So a critical thinking person says, okay, well, what are my options right now on the table? How many are out there? Not how many religions are out there, but how many actual options are out there? And you're going to say, well, okay, there's Christianity, which is big, 2.8 to 3 billion people in the world. There's Islam, which is about 1.2 billion. There's Buddhism, which is probably at least half a billion or close to a billion. You've got Hinduism, which is probably about 1 billion. You got Judaism, which is pretty, and then you have scientific materialism, which is atheism, right? Those are pretty much your options. There's subsets of beliefs within those options, but that's pretty much basically it, those big five. So then you would ask yourself, if you're a critical thinking person, okay, how do they compare with one another? How do they align with the reality I experience every day? What do they produce over a long period of time? Every belief system is filled with flawed people. Some people are flawed more than others. So when you look at Buddhists, you have to say, okay, there's been crazy Buddhists throughout the centuries that have done crazy things. Is that because of their belief system or in spite of their belief system? That's a very important question to ask, is does Buddhist philosophy produce these radical acts? Like, I believe in the 1600s, there was a group of Buddhists that went and massacred a bunch of other people or something along that lines. I can't dig into the exact historical account of it because the details escape me. But that was pretty much in spite of what Buddhism teaches. Okay, so you have to say that that's an outlier. It's not, Buddhists generally don't produce a lot of violent people. But Buddhism does produce a lot of non-caring people, and it produces a lot of meaninglessness in life because it basically says that the result of all of your, dissonance and anger and all the negative emotions you have are a result of your expectations. So if you get rid of expectations, then you're going to be at peace. Well, the problem is that I just don't think that's true, because what you can do is you can say, I'm going to bring down the things that create negative emotions within me. And so my unhappiness quotient will come down because Buddhism focuses a lot on physical activity. So my unhappiness, according to Dr. Brooks, will go down. But I'm not doing anything on the positive side of the equation. I'm not doing anything to raise my happiness. And so it seems to me that you kind of become just emotionally neutral. And I don't think that's the way you're meant to live as a human being. You have Islam. Now, Islam, when you look back over 1,500 years of Islam, it is inescapable that Islam produces violence. Every time Islam expands, it expands through violence and military conquest. You cannot be an honest historian or an intellectual person and not come to that conclusion, because that's what historically it has produced. Now, some people say, well, Christianity is filled with violence. That is true. But what has Christianity over 2,000 years produced? The most peaceful, the most equitable societies and civilizations that have ever existed in the world. So I think that you got to ask yourself over a long period of time, what do these things produce? What does scientific materialism produce? Well, we talked about it, and the bloodiest century in all human history was the 20th century, the 1900s. And every major war and the eradication of hundreds of millions of people, I mean, just think of that. Over 100 million people lost in Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, the wiping out, the Holodomor, which was the Russian wiping out of Ukraine, starving to death, upwards of 10 million people in that one thing. Pol Pot, the eradication of 2 million of his own people. You look at Nazism. What do all of these things have in common? They were all scientific materialism. They were all based on atheism, every single one. So you can't get around that atheism produces a dehumanization. That's why I'm all in on Jesus, because a critical thinking person comes to the conclusion that, well, I got to put my faith in something if I'm going to be happy. I want to put my faith in something that has the best track record throughout the history of civilizations, that produces fruitful, peace-loving, happy people. And so I'm all in on that. Number two is not only what do they produce over a long period of time, is how do these things align with the reality in which I live? And this is why I'm all in on Jesus, because Christianity, what Jesus said, has the best description of where evil comes from and how to deal with evil. And one of the biggest things, if you're a thinking person, is you have to deal with evil and suffering in your life, right? And so one of the things is that Buddhists say, well, the reason why there's evil and suffering in your life is because you expect something. Well, that works until violent people who are unjust do unjust things. How do you deal with that? Well, Buddhism has no answer for that, right? They just said, well, you shouldn't expect justice. You shouldn't expect. Well, I expect justice. I expect that we're probably going to struggle to be just people, and people are going to make mistakes, and bad people are going to get away from things. But do you really want to live in a world where bad people are allowed to do whatever they want, whenever they want, without consequence? Not me, and I know certainly not you. You don't run your family that way. So this is why Christianity really explains the reality that I live in each and every day, that I experience each and every day. And that's why happiness, joy, fulfillment comes from believing spiritually in the right thing to put your faith in. So I agree with Dr. Brooks. Let's go back full circle. I agree with him when he says, if you want to be more happy, you need to invest in your faith, your philosophy of life, in family, in friends, and meaningful work. We're going to talk about these other ones in weeks to come. But over the next couple of weeks, starting next week, we're going to talk about why Jesus explains the ultimate reality and why faith in him is your best option and choice when it comes to anybody who wants to have more happiness in their life. So I hope you're all in for that leading up to our resurrection celebration, which is Easter. And then we're going to jump into the new series called The Christian Championship Mind. And that is, how do I have victory over all of the things in my life that are stopping me from walking, living, and experiencing joy and happiness every moment of every day? So you won't want to miss that. Now, little housekeeping items is number one, I would love for you to go over to YouTube, type in The Salty Pastor, like and subscribe. I would love for you to go to our website and look at all the things that we're doing there, and also sign up for the Monday morning inspirational email that I send out to inspire you for your week. Also, if you're there, click on that donate button and jump in. We've got a lot of things that we're going to try to expand. We're developing a brand new vision to help parents and people get coaching. We want to coach people up in their parenting. We also want to start coaching people up in their finances, and we want to start coaching people up in their health. So we're going to be adding talent to the Salty Pastor universe, and we're gonna just have a spiritual track, and then we're gonna have all these other tracks to help you grow in your faith. It's an incredible vision. It's massive, but we need people to support that so we can launch this. I believe it's just going to become a powerful brand out there to help people be coached up in every area of your life, where they can go and they can realize, wow, what I'm hearing is not just some pitch for a product. What I'm hearing is what's true, because salt is all about preserving what's true. And it's not polarized, bifurcated, or radical. It's just about what works, what's true, what's supported by research and science, and what we know is undergirded and built on the foundation of the revelatory truth of Jesus Christ in the Bible. So I'm excited about that, and I want you to be a part of that. So become part of the Salty Crew. So join up for that. Email and go to the website, check out things, and if you can, become a regular supporter of the Salty Pastor, because, man, it is going to blow up, and I want you to be in on the ground floor. Until then, remember, Salty Pastor signing off, because what you believe is one of the most important things about you.